Welcome to the 13th episode of the podcast. This is your proprietor, Tony Ortega, coming to you from an undisclosed location deep inside the interior of the Earth's crust, otherwise known as the underground bunker. If you've been a Scientology watcher as long as some of our stalwarts at the bunker, you'll remember a time when our guest today was as electric a campaigner against Scientology's abuses as anyone who had come out of the organization's upper ranks. At one point, Jesse Prince was just a couple of rungs below founder L. Ron Hubbard himself, and he was even David Miscavige's auditor. But then, around the turn of the century, Jesse became one of Scientology's biggest headaches and a major target for its retaliation campaigns. We've kept in touch with him since he put out a memoir a few years ago, and we were thrilled when he agreed to come on the podcast. We knew we'd be in for a bumpy ride. Jesse Prince, what a treat this is. I always enjoy speaking with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good and just learning how to live. That's all.
Well,
Happy.
you've always had to overcome quite a few challenges, haven't you?
Well, I have, and I succeed. I'm still here. So what do I say?
You're a fighter. You're a fighter.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
one thing I thought I'd bring up with you is the fresh news this week, which is that Scientology gets sued again and again, and lawsuits often name David Miscavige a defendant. But then what he does is he makes it so that process servers can't come anywhere near him. And these people that are suing the church have a real hard time making him a defendant. And a couple of years ago, Valerie Haney and the Masterson accusers, they just could never get him served. But this new lawsuit, they also had this trafficking lawsuit in Tampa. They also had a hard time finding him, but they went to the
Mm.
court and explained that here's all this evidence that Dave is evading service. And the court agreed and has issued a summons for him. And I just thought I'd
Wow.
get yeah, I thought I'd get your thoughts on that because you know maybe better than most people how he insulates himself and how he might be reacting to something like that.
Well, a summons now. Of course, this is a civil case, though, right?
It's a civil case, so the summons means that the state will be able to serve him more on just a notification basis. They won't have to physically hand him any papers. So
Right.
if the next couple of steps go right, the way I understand it, he will become an official defendant in this lawsuit. He's going to have to start sending an attorney down there and all the other thing. And I guess the thing that could be most interesting is once he's an official defendant, I would assume that these plaintiffs would try to get him deposed. And of course, that would be the most fun.
Well, absolutely. That is what they're trying. Even more than deposing him, they would probably be more interested in avoiding having an exact place where he's going to be, so that others can serve him as well. That's probably a concern that's right at the forefront. I know it always was for Elron when he was on the run. It was always such a struggle for process servers, whether there were law enforcement or otherwise, to find a representative to accept service.
You make a really good point there, Jesse, because I didn't think about that. That one of the consequences of this, if this Tampa lawsuit, if these plaintiffs can get David not only a defendant, but at some point down to the courthouse, then that would make him vulnerable to other people trying to serve the guy.
Well, they won't even have to necessarily get him to the courthouse. All they have to do is discover and find an exact means for the court to accept a service on him, and whether that's by representative or whether that's by handing him the papers or whatever. I mean, there's law that clearly states those things, but that's what kind of broke the dam for Elron when the plaintiffs actually found a way to get him or some entity to accept the service on his behalf. And once that started, then the suits just piled up.
I see.
There's no path to serve Miscavige by civil or criminal at this point, and that he's being compelled right now, or has the potential of being propelled, is certainly a step in the right direction.
How do you think he's reacting to that? You knew the guy.
You know, it's a double-edged sword when things like this happen. That you probably observed, Tony. In one sense, it unites the Scientologists, the threat, and it turns into a big fundraiser. I mean, we know how that goes in today's society, where we see that phenomenon, and that's the outward public appearance of it. But inside, there's certainly a concern because eventually, what happened, just kind of drawing a similarity between Miscavige and Elron, Miscavige being the current leader. Eventually, when that path was discovered and the suits started piling up, that was the beginning of the corporate sort out mission, where um, all the money or the reserves were in a certain location or whatever. So the suits were attacking that, or everything was including that. And part of the strategy was to break the corporation up and limit liability to just the Church of Scientology, California. So, as far as Miscavige's liability is concerned, if he, being the leader of the church, more than likely corporately, he's on these boards, whatever board of directors they have, whatever they filed, he's on those boards. And just as a fact of law, you can sue those boards, and they have to have a person to accept service. So that is the path to service, and it sounds like someone's discovering that, or they've gone through. And it's not an easy process for sure, not even for law enforcement because of the runaround. But it sounds like they've gotten that crack in the door, and that normally, as I said in the past, it kind of started a house of cards, resulted in big changes, resulted in Elron going into hiding. That also resulted in the attorneys actually having to go to Elron, do a video, and explain to the judge, why he can't. And it was very elaborate. It was just, I mean, I'm sure you know the history of that, but it was certainly part of the ending of Elron for sure.
So maybe there's some similar a panic, all hands on deck. I mean, this I have imagined that Miscavige is not happy about this judge deciding that he has been evading service. I assume he's going to come into court or have an attorney come into court and whine and cry about it.
Oh, you're going to see Monique, and you're going to see all the attorneys for whoever, whatever corporations that are listed on those suits, organizations, flag, whatever, able, whatever. They're all going to be lawyered up with multiple attorneys, and the whole purpose of that will be to just delay, 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 and in the meantime, probably Ben or their other peacemakers will be coming around opening that bag, because the last thing they want is to have a judgment. The last thing they want is to have a clear path to suing, set a precedent of how do you serve Miscavige, how, and you know, once that path is established, it is the crack in the dam. I'd have to say.
Well, it's an interesting time for sure. But let's remind some of our newer folks who you are because I'm not sure everybody knows. Um, I mean, at one time you were like the second or third highest ranking Scientologist in the world, and you were really helping to run things as David Miscavige was still coming up, right?
Sure. I mean, in that phase of Scientology, as far as the leadership, I mean, it's not that way now, and it probably wasn't that way before. But during my time, it was not just, well, it was the one person, Elron. There was a clear and distinct leader that certainly had more talent and more draws. power than the current leader, Miscavige, who, you know, anyway. But it was a coalition of people. It was a coalition of people, somewhat intelligent people and the best lawyers. It was an actual team, so it was a lot of people, and Miscavige was at that. He was just a player. He was just a part of it. He didn't have Elron's leadership. He didn't have Elron's authority. There were other people that had similar authority to Miscavige, and they could assert it. So it was more balanced. It was more balanced. Right now, I don't think Miscavige has that balance. I think he's pretty much isolated it to himself, and the danger that Miscavige is in right now is if he's carried on just being a harsh and just a harsh prick to everyone, he's made a lot of enemies and enemies within, not outside, but actually around him and within. And they're waiting for his downfall. They're waiting for him to crack. They're waiting for a reason to betray him. People may not, be able to resist being bullied or whatever, but if they have a chance to get even, more than likely, more often than not, they do. So I think Miscavige is in a very dangerous position right now.
That's interesting because I think you're right. I think he has isolated himself. I think he's gotten rid of anybody he thought might be a threat, put him in the hole or whatever.
He's
And he's
forgot he's
got,
gotten rid of anyone who knows who he really is.
yeah.
So and they're he's playing on this facade of like this intelligent, great leader, whatever. When in fact none of that is true. He
Well, you were his auditor at one point, weren't you?
Sure. That's why I'm speak like this. I understand his thinking. I understand the psychology of what happened there. I have an idea. I think I have a pretty educated idea of what's going on now. Being the fact, and I'm speaking from a legal perspective specifically because that ended up being my job towards the end of my career in Scientology, was to represent it in a courtroom. I was the face of Scientology technology inside of a courtroom. The first and only person that ever did that in Scientology. That's who I am.
Right, and that's reflected in the title of your book, The Expert, is you were certified as an expert witness on behalf of Scientology, which then
and
of
the
course
court
drove
itself and the court
which
itself. Don't forget that part. I was
which so what
recognized in many courts across the United States, from Florida to California, as an expert in Scientology, and I witnessed in the McPherson case. I witnessed in the early case. I witnessed in the Wallerstein case. It was accepted by all of these judges. Another case that Brian Haney was fighting with Digital Lightwave, and I never lost any of those cases. And I was the only person, and to this day, I am still the only person that was accepted by the court and Scientology as an expert on the subject of Scientology itself.
and that drove them crazy later when you had left and then people wanted to use you as an expert in their lawsuits, and of course then Scientology had a hard time denying that you knew what you were talking about, right?
They could not deny that, and then not only that, they never brought another person against me to counter my expertise, such as another person in the technology, I should say, like the senior case supervisor of Scientology International, or the senior criminal, or any senior anybody, or even the next leader, never presented themselves as a counter expert to me, ever. It was just lawyers. They sent their lawyers. They tried to use lawyers to counter my testimony, and it never worked. And they never had any representative from the church itself that could ever handle my testimony.
So they instead used the dirty tricks, right?
Use attorneys, to argue with the court, like, oh, he don't know what he's talking about, or he's lying, or he's this, or he's that, and that was never a finding. So all of my testimony there across courts across America and in Europe, of what I've written to the court, like an amicus brief or whatever, about Scientology, and those records are accepted. They're in the court records to this day.
Hmm. Hmm. And like I said, they couldn't counter that, so instead they just used the dirty tricks, right?
Yeah, and it didn't work. So they settled the cases, and then everything stopped.
I see. You know what? A question I had is, you so Hubbard died in '86. You left in '92. You were kind of away from everything for a while, just making a living. But then at some point, you met Bob Minton. I'd like to hear that story.
Well, that's also covered in my book. Shoot, man, I was just in recovery from Scientology. Coming from that place, of that world, and when I think about where I was in relationship to today's standards, I have to be honest with myself. I was living in a world where there was, rampant and lascivious sexual acts were not allowed.
Hmm.
Drug use was not allowed. Whoring and all this kind of stuff was not allowed. In other words, we actually had that closed system. It was crazy, but we were certainly insulated from a lot of the evil and nasty shit in the world, which we used to hear about, around, oh, you don't know how horrible the world is, and we're trying to create this safe space, blah, 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 blah. So I was in the midst of not only being totally confused about where I had been for the last 16 years, but trying to adapt to this world that I had been cautioned about so much, and then kind of seeing on a certain level that shit, what he said about this is right. It's insane out here. It's insane. So at that point, that's when I met Bob Minton. Um, Prior to that, Scientology, the leadership, Miscavige and Mike Sutter and stuff, they used to keep tabs on me to see how I was doing.
Uh huh.
One time they flew me out to New York to meet. This is when Earl Cooley was still alive. I'm talking way history. But this is when Earl Cooley was alive, who was a wonderful, wonderful person, a wonderful lawyer. I learned so much from him. I learned so much. He's really the one that trained me to be an expert, how to conduct myself, how to write, how to think, as far as in the legal system, to be an expert witness in that environment. And he and I got along just great. And I remember one time he flew me out there. This is when, after I'd been out of Scientology, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, I had moved on to another career. I was working, managing and booking bands. I had about 26 bands. I worked at an agency called Mid America Talent Agency, and I had no concept of going back and attacking Scientology or doing anything with Scientology. I just wanted to be free of it. I didn't ask for money. They gave me no money. I asked for no money. All I asked from them is to let me have my freedom. I just want to get on with the rest of my life. So that's what I was doing. And learning to live in the world after being outside of it. I mean, you don't watch TV for 16 years. You don't really listen. You're not in that fashion or the trend of music, like what's trending now, what new genres, all of the mechanisms of being in the world was not there for me for 16 years. So coming back into this, I mean, the first time I watched television, I felt like I was getting shock treatment. It made me so bad. I felt so horrible. I felt like, what have I done? I've come to this shithole. I've gone from the frying pan to the fire.
Wow.
So yeah, I was and plus racism, white supremacy, all this shit still in the world. And which was particularly hard on me. And I just came right back to it. All of that nastiness, all of that evil, wickedness, it just came right there. It wasn't there for me in Scientology. So it's like it was a struggle for me. Like, what the fuck did I do? I made a horrible mistake here. Look where I'm at. I'm in hell. I've traded purgatory for hell. So
Wow.
yeah, I was definitely struggling with that. But then, uh, and I got heavily into reading the Bible and reading scriptures, just trying to straighten my mind out. Um, Reading other theologies, reading other my other interests that I actually got into Scientology for, finding out potential of human potential. I started looking in those areas again. I just started to calm down from Scientology. I was just ready to move the fuck on. And then here comes Stacey Brooks, wicked ass. um, I was just back then in those days, and it all seems so quaint now. We had internet cafes. You remember when it
Yeah.
was like coffee and it was a social thing. People would get on and all of that shit. So I would go. I didn't personally own a computer, but I would go to the internet cafe. It was very trendy and get on there and create username, log on, all of that. And, I don't know how it happened. I stumbled on this Scientology. I just typed in Scientology and boof, all this shit came up. And it seemed so blasphemous to me what I had read, what people were saying about Scientology. It was like, don't they realize how much trouble they're going to get into by saying that, or how disloyal they are? All of these kind of emotions and things just started coming up in me. So over time, I guess maybe over a 2 week period, after going to that internet cafe and reading what people were saying about Scientology, it helped me to unpack. It let me know that I still had a way to go, and then the shit that hit the fan was the Lisa McPherson.
Right.
A girl was dead, walking down the street naked. All of that kind of activity in Scientology was fresh in my mind at the time because I had previously done a handling on a person that had lost their mind, went psychotic, and I personally had to deal with that person and do whatever I could to help them get their mind back, which eventually happened over some weeks. But when I started hearing the news about Lisa McPherson and how she was walking down the street naked and all, I mean, I completely understood the scenario. I knew I had understanding, I had conceptual understanding about how that happened, what the girl went through, especially when I started hearing all this ethics stuff and all of this and all of this. And I knew what was wrong with that girl. And then that she died and how she died and how they covered it up because I knew it so well being an expert in Scientology. I understood conceptually everything that went down there. And that was when I decided, okay, I got to go and get these assholes. Bob and Stacy were doing it. This person was dead, and I don't know why should I care. Nobody in Scientology, even to this day, gives a shit about me, but I cared. It just touched my heart. It's like now she's fucking dead. She was just trying to be a better person. So I joined the team as an expert. Bob talked to me, and it was just like, I just put my head in my hands because he's part of this insane world that I'm into now. Here you have this crazy narcissistic person with all this goddamn money, and he's out of control. Really, me and Stacey are talking because we're on a different wavelength, but she's with him, and this is her new damn boyfriend. And she's telling me he's going to help us with Scientology. He really has an interest in it. Blah blah blah. So you know that's kind of how I got into the fray back into anything to do with Scientology. You know, the short story, and I worked on that case until the end of it. No one lost the case; it was settled, and so I kept my perfect record. I never lost a case as an expert in or out of Scientology, and people got made money, and and the thing that upset me, even though I personally got brutalized for doing that, the thing that I got out of it was the same thing I went into it for. As a result, people aren't being killed like that anymore in Scientology. They're much more cautious about it. It slowed down and it just stopped. They just didn't want that trouble anymore. And so that happened. That's how that went down, and that's that.
Well, I mean, they did target you for daring to help out with Bob and Stacy, right?
Oh my God, yeah, and that's very much detailed in my book. Just and Osa and Mike Render and every damn body else, they lost their damn minds, and they didn't understand, they didn't understand, and I just really had to be the bigger person and try to understand for them and move forward as best I could, and we did. And God knows I am not a perfect person under any stretch of the imagination, but I don't have any hate in my heart, and I don't have any evil in my heart, so I think that gives me an advantage over some people.
Well, one of the things I liked about your book, and I contrasted it with, say, Marty's book, was that you talked about some of the things you did for Scientology that were not nice things. I mean, they wanted you to do some of their dirty work for them, and I just thought it was really useful for you to tell those stories, whereas somebody like Marty was still trying to paint himself as some kind of a hero after he had left Scientology. I thought that was a big difference, and one of the reasons I
Yeah.
like what you had to say.
And I wrote my book from my perspective, and Marty wrote his from his, and I tell you, one of the, if you really just want to get down to the nuts and bolts, the difference between my account and Marty's account is that I just don't have the ego. You know, I wasn't. I didn't give a shit about running Scientology. Dave Miscavige, at the end of my Scientology term, as I call it, after L. Ron died, I chose to leave because I was up there. I understood. I mean, I was with L. Ron the whole time. His thinking, I had dialed in. I understood better than most, apparently, due to my position, what he was trying to do, what his vision was, what the technology meant, how to apply it, all of that. I got that. And at the end, this shit didn't work. I tried. I did. I gave it my heart. I gave it my soul, and it just didn't work. Okay. So Elron's now dead. Miscavige begged me to come and help him lead. And I just wouldn't. I wouldn't even see him. I wouldn't even give him an audience to talk to because I didn't want him to talk me into it because I knew he could. I mean, let me just lay this on the table. This is another thing that there's probably never been spoken by me or anyone else. Of all the people in Scientology, of all the ones that I know and came across with, had very few close friends. Very few, because we really weren't allowed to be friends. We were allowed to be associates. And the instant, you did something out of lines, that was the end of our damn friendship. So friendship really wasn't anything allowed in that system of things. Or it was rare. But I can truly say the only friend that I ever had, true friend in Scientology, that would actually lift me up and help me was Dave Miscavige. He is
Really?
the only one. I mean, when you have a friend and it's a true friend, they include you in their life. And that's what David did to me, and Render never did that, and Marty never did that, or any of those people. He included me in his life. I included him in my life. He's the one that picked my wife for me. We used to go and play racquetball together, go do basketball together. That's what friends do. When they got free time, they look for one another, they do things together. We would do music together, listen to albums, talk about music, whatever, whatever. It was, work was work, friendship was friendship. That's the relationship I had with Miscavige. So it broke his heart when I wouldn't help him, and my heart was broken too, because nothing was there for me to. There was no reason for me to stay, and I couldn't say it as succinctly as I'm able to speak on it today. But that what was in my heart. There's no reason for me to be here. I you know, in the end, it's like you play that radio station. What's in it for me? I'm not gonna do shit unless something is in it for me. There has to be a reason, a justification for me to be here. So in that regard, I had done every OT levels, all the training, all the new stuff, everything, whatever, pilots, whatever. And guess what? It was in the end, it just wasn't. It didn't produce what it said it could. It produced something, but not what it said it could. And to that degree, I couldn't keep doing it.
It's really interesting that you say that about Miscavige because talking to a few of the others recently, they were reminding me that there was a time uh, around the same period you're talking about when Miscavige and people like Jaeger and Midhoff and Will here, they'd go bowling on the weekends, you know, and then
Bowling,
systematic.
basketball. We used to go to the club. You hear me? RTC. There was a place called the Hop. We would go there and get drunk in the fuck on the weekend, dance all night,
Wow.
and kill squirrels. Kill dissidents during the day. No, we lived a regular life. I'm telling you, me and Miss Scott, we went to parties, throwing food in the restaurant. Showing off. Our money, our power. I'm telling you, it was like it was a juggernaut of people, and it wasn't just one. And we somehow got along and enjoyed what we were doing.
Well, let me ask you then, because you left in '96, and
92,
I'm sorry, 90. You
92.
left in '92. Sorry,
But
and then, like you said, then the McPherson, she died in '95, and then it started to become a legal thing in '96, '97, and then in 2004, that litigation was finally done with, and that's when he created the whole. And one by one, all these guys he used to go bowling with or drinking with, he turned on them all. He put them all in this prison, and they've been there ever since. 18 years. So, I mean, do you have any insight into what's driving this guy that he would take all these close friends, the only people he could really trust in the world, and turn on them like that?
yes, yes, I do. I have. Well, I have an opinion about it. I don't know if I have insight because I'm not on the scene and I don't know the real whys and wherefores of how that could happen. But just as an outsider, I'm looking at those people and those group of people, like how many of them this happened to at the same time, and I'm looking at this diminutive little person doing that, you know. And I had a realization about this recently. How the fuck can this little person do this to all of these people that are so much bigger to him, and he does it and all they do is cry and whine and comply? How does that happen? Because that is so far out of my reality, because well, people say you street, you that, you the other thing, but this is what I came to realize about this, and this was just recently because you know, I couldn't see it as clearly as I see it now. A lot of those people were born into Scientology, so that's all they know.
Yeah.
That was not my path in Scientology. I came from the world into Scientology, kind of looking for what it could give me. So I wasn't raised in that shit. I had to learn it, and I did. And then I learned it so well that I ended up teaching it to them and working with the founder. And and then he was gone, and then so was I. So you know, people, I was able to see a distinction between people that were raised in Scientology versus people that go to it off the street. There is a distinction, and I think that probably explains why some little tiny person could do this to all of these bigger people, because in the real world he would be fucking killed, smashed, beat to death. He would never even think of ever doing it again if he survived one attempt. That's what happens in this world that I came into after leaving Scientology. No one will put up with that shit. Period.
Well, that
I
explains
mean, in
maybe.
today's world, you can't go outside. You can't sit outside and have something and sit outside in a restaurant with some people coming up to jack your ass. You think you're gonna go out in the world, and people gonna salute you, and you do that shit too? No, it just won't happen.
Well, let me. That explains why they're not retaliating. But can you hazard a guess as to what's going on in his head, that he's basically imprisoned all of the people that he used to
I think
consider
what's
friends?
going on in his head is a equal level of desperation. When you keep he's not getting the right reaction from them that he's looking for, so he keeps doing it. Okay, I'll give you a classic example. He's Polish. He's already racist, or raised that way, his crazy ass daddy, whatever. And he had this problem with calling me the N-word when I first got there. And hey, wait a minute, I pulled him to the side. I didn't do it in front of everyone. I said, look, man, we got to talk about this, because if you do this shit again, I'm going to beat your motherfucking ass so bad you will be fucking unrecognizable. I just like, our relationship gonna be over right here. If this is how you want to proceed, the Jesse agreeing part is over, and Dave's part being in extreme fucking danger begins.
Wow.
And I explained it to him, and he understood. You know, I'll give you another classic example. Now he gets all of those people that he's put in a motherfucking hold. They were all piled up against me when he woke me up in the middle of the night to let me know that he was putting me in the RPF. And he just let me escape for 5 minutes. I came back with all the fucking guns I had. Okay, and I let him know who the fuck was sir. So that is the difference between a person that was raised in the world versus a person that was raised in some crazy ass cult, and they can't think outside the box. They think they have to put up with that abuse. They think that's normal. They think that's okay because everyone stands around and watches it. And that's why the system itself is just extremely perverse, because it makes no sense. I don't understand even how they sell Scientology these days, but that those people would do that is more on them than it is on Miscavige. I mean, if one of them actually stood up and said, okay, fuck that, you little bastard, we ain't doing that, it would change the program for them all. He would have some resistance, and he would reevaluate, and maybe he would give them some respect. But they don't. They just whine and cry and whimper. And it's just amazing to me. I don't know.
It
I don't
is
know.
amazing. He's maintained this kind of control for, as I pointed out.
Well,
Go
but
ahead.
let's put that in the world. Let's put that in the world. We have a similar example that just happened. Here we have this frail old lady, the queen, 95 years, 96 years old. She just died. People are coming out the woodwork hating on her. Oh, that goddamn bitch. We have slavery and colonization, and oh, she did this and she did that and she did this and she did that. Well, you know what? She didn't live long enough to be able to do all of that. She was born into that shit. She carried on the tradition, and she lived and she died. That's another thing that kind of brought it into perspective to me. People that are brought into something, I mean, that's kind of their destiny. They're not going to change.
Well, you've said this a few times now about how you weren't born into it. Tell us quickly how you did find Scientology to begin with.
I was, I was looking for answers. I had, I'm not gonna uh, talk too much about this part, but I'll just say this: I had an epiphany. I had an experience. I had like a Bodhi experience about life, and I'll just say, I had something and I thought I was God. I felt like I was God. I started acting like I was God. I mean, I started doing shit that, people can't do, or whatever. And it freaked my family. And it was as a result of taking some drugs. I took a bunch of PCP or whatever, a bunch of something, and it just put me somewhere. And, you know, it freaked my whole family out, freaked my friends out. I'm running around telling people I'm God. Um, I and I had a peace about it. I wasn't God Thor, throwing lightnings, or God of the Old Testament about to tear the whole fucking place up. I was kind of like had Jesus peace, and so it took me some time to recover from that experience of overdosing on those drugs, and in contemplation, or at least I had a long road to contemplation. But I had kind of like reached a state of nirvana. It made me feel so good. I was at peace with everyone and everything. I loved everyone and everything. I had the confidence of a God. There was nothing I wanted to do in it, but I had no malice in my heart. And so it took me about, I don't know, a month or so just to come down from that trip. Tony, I would literally sit outside in the freezing cold, like minus 14. I would sit outside in a t-shirt on a ledge, and I would just sit there and concentrate, and I would make my body sweat while
Where was
outside in the
this?
steam, in Decatur, Illinois. Steam flying off my fucking body. I'm outside. I mean, I went through something. I had there was a mystical experience, whatever. I had an experience. So that happened when I was 21. Shortly after that, I got into Scientology because I was searching for answers. I was like, I want to know what happened to me.
Right.
After I kind of came back to my regular human mind, I'm the me instead of the I got the me Jesse. It's like, what happened to me? What was that experience? How was that? I knew I didn't have a body. I knew that God was love, and just so many things, and I was outside of my body for sometimes too. So I was already on the path of searching. Right after that incident happened, I was reading books like the Carlos Castaneda books, that whole fucking fraud. I was also reading about Rosicrucians, and I was reading anything I could find about being separated from the spirit being separated from the body.
Uh huh.
I was into all of that kind of thing. So I was ripe when I in 1976, walking down the street in San Francisco, this beautiful redhead woman asked me, "You want to know more about yourself?" I'm like, "Yes, I do. I want the whole enchilada. I want to know about me and you." So that's kind of, so I was, I came there for a purpose. I had this thing that made me feel like I was God. Then I ran into this shit that tells me, well, you are a God and we're going to teach you how to God. Hey, it seemed like to be a perfect match.
Yeah.
So that's how, and that's why I was loyal to it. At least somebody was trying to teach me how to be what I am.
And then how did you end up like the number three guy in the whole organization?
Miscavige and other people raised me up because I never had an ego, Tony, as God is my witness. I never wanted to be this or that. And I thought that was my mental illness. I don't give a shit. I'm not trying to be the leader. Nothing. I'm happy to just watch, do my part. I don't want, But people kept lifting me up. Oh, he does it. Because he does good work. Because he actually learns, tries to understand. I just kept getting lifted up, lifted up. It was Miscavige that brought me to L. Ron and said, here's the guy that understands Scientology more than anybody else and can teach us all.
Wow.
Miscavige did that. But did I ask for it? No. All them stripes and bars, I never asked for that shit. It was given to me.
And L. Ron himself, what were your interactions with him?
Just the one time, really, interactions as far as physically, but my interactions with him beginning sometime around 1982 until his death involved helping him create new technology or being a pilot auditor for creation of new technology like rollback technology, false purpose rundown, truth rundown, all these kind of things. I was there for the genesis of all of that. And formulating, helping him formulate that. Also, concurrently, he was writing that 10-volume decology of crazy science fiction shit. And I was an avid science fiction fans, and everybody knew it because of Stephen King. I used to scare people on the base with my Stephen King shit. So Von Young was my friend, and he was editing L. Ron's book. Anyway, I ended up getting a manuscript. Every time one was finished and edited, it would give to me, give my opinion. So I'm right there with L. Ron, and then I'm also through dispatching different things with Incom. That's when Scientology was forming its internal computer network system, and I was over that as well, but not knowing shit about computers, but still people put me in these positions because they thought I'd do a good job, because I guess I did a good job with everything else I tried to do. And so, it's the one time, and I kept, and these dispatches and things L. Ron he asked me to do, and I seemed to do them perfectly and whatever. And then one day when he was happy with Scientology leadership, which was maybe about a year and a half before he started having those severe medical problems that eventually led to his death, he wanted to see who his management team was. He wanted to see like where international management was. He wanted to see the Golden Era production crew because this is where he was going to come. He wanted to see the people where he was going to come. So everybody had to take a picture. Ted Horner was the person that was over photographing all of the people at the Gold Base at the time. And of course, I'm the black sheep in the damn family, and it didn't actually go along with L. Ron's thinking or his idea that a black person could achieve any type of level of intelligence, given how he spoke about them before, and he had never really had a visual of me. So for me to be at the top of the game on the tech and correction, I mean, I'm even, as you say, parallel with Miscavige, at least to the point where I'm his counselor. He's not my damn counselor. I'm the person applying technology to him.
Right.
And so he asked everyone to have a picture, and then they did. We all took a nice headshot, and then the pictures were sent to him. And about a week later, next thing you know, I am summoned to go down to where they used to eat the food at called Massacre Canyon Inn out there at Golden Era Productions. They had planters in the parking lot. Anyway, long story short, I was asked to stand on the planter and do not look at the people in the car, but someone wants to see you. I knew who the fuck it was.
Oh wow.
Here he comes in the Cadillac, Pat Broker driving, circling me like I'm a damn slave on the slave block. But I couldn't help it. I had to look. And I saw him, and he was looking at me, and he was just beaming. His little black eyes just shining. His little messed up teeth looked like fucking Santa Claus. Wild, crazy hair, and he just had this big shit-eating grin on his face. And then when he saw me glance at him, the car left. I was told that I would get in so much trouble if I looked at that car, and they would know. Not a fucking word. Next thing you know, I got presents, and he's so happy. He's so happy with the team. He's so happy to see me as part of the team. That was a good time. That was when it was a good time. We were preparing for him to come, but then his health failed, and he died.
And then were you at the Palladium that night?
No, I wasn't at the Palladium because when it was decided to announce L. Ron's death, we wanted to announce it as best we could to the world at the same time in the same moment. So me and Mark Yeager, I believe it was me and Mark Yeager, or me and Guillaume, I can't remember. No, it was me and Mark Yeager. Yeah, me and Mark Yeager went to Italy and did the event and announced his death together.
Oh, I see.
Executives went everywhere, and Pat Broker and Miscavige did it at the Palladium. We planned this event that was very much choreographed. So no, I was not at the Palladium when he died. I was in Italy.
I guess you left just before tax exempt status
No, I was there.
because that was
I think I
'93.
was there. Huh?
That was
They got it in
'93.
'93.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. Well, then no, I guess I just missed it. But in my heart, I celebrated with them. It was crazy, but because it was a true victory. I mean, irregardless of what Scientology is or whatever, you had a small group of people who, over time, which in reality I was a part of, that fought the system and won. The government has never been a friend of the black man for one fucking thing. So I don't have a lot of love for government. And to be associated with something that could overcome the will of the government was a very powerful thing. It still is.
I see. I see. And then let me ask you, because I know some of our readers, some of the readers know that I've talked about this in the past. You've had some real health challenges, but the last time we talked, you sound like you're doing great.
Man, look, you know, I had to unlearn so much, from Scientology, after getting out. But, and I had to be honest with myself about a lot of things. I had to be honest with myself about the good and the bad and reconcile these things and move on. And when I, uh, reconciled or began to clearly reconcile my Scientology experience, it only brought to view the beginning of a reconciliation that I needed to do in my life. Because I've been known to rag on my Scientology brothers and sisters that I was in there with, about how when they do get out, they run to their whiteness, and they run and they be white, and they're accepted in that community of people being white, and they're able to do well and prosper in some cases or whatever. They able to find succor, able to find comfort and a place in that system of things. And I hated them for that because I'm not white, and I can't do that. But what did it do? It blamed, well, what the hell are you? Well, you're black, and you've always been black, and and you were in this organization, which is basically really for white supremacy, and you were not only there, you were at the top of it. So at some point, I had to not only remember, but I had to accept and embrace myself, my blackness, to put all of this shit in perspective anyway. I had to really learn myself. I had to come back to myself, or at least what the world expects of me. I had to view myself in the mirror in order to be a whole person, to reconcile life and move on, without regret.
And it sounds like you're doing really well now.
Well, I am health wise. I'm doing really well because I live a conscious life. I've I no longer do the red meat, and plus I'm older, so when you're older and shit starts breaking down, you're automatically going to be more conscious of your health if you want to live a quality of life. So for that reason, I eat healthy. I'm very conscious about what I eat. I eat very little red meat, and I'm conscious of exercise. I'm conscious of of eating enough vegetables and all of this stuff, and meditating, cleaning my thoughts, being away from negativity. Just I'm older now, so I can't handle that hard, harsh energy of like fighting and all that shit. I'm just trying to cruise on out of here in peace. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Yes, but some of us are going to remember you, though, Jesse, for those battling days because you were quite a figure. I mean, you went over to Germany and gave speeches about Scientology, right?
In and out, yes. While I was there and out, yes. I helped build what Scientology is today. All of these, I was there during the formation of hiring of again, when they started coming after Elron and they had to break up the Church of Scientology, California, which was where all the money was put and all the power was, when they had to break that stuff up into different corporations, such as Author Services, so that Elron could get paid his royalties from the books.
Right.
And then figuring all of that out. Then the trademarks and copyrights to RTC, so that those weren't endangered by all of these lawsuits. And then, Church of Scientology and that, and then all these other ones had to be separately incorporated. I was there for all of that shit. So I'm a principal of Scientology. And, it never, ceases to amaze me, the arrogance of some of these new people in Scientology, or some of the people in Scientology who were there and didn't know what the fuck was going on. They want to challenge me, or think they know something that's going on that I don't. But, I just the arrogance of Scientology itself is enough to keep me away. I don't give a damn which side you're on. Just the arrogance of it all is enough to make me not participate in it so much anymore. I just don't have the patience or the will, nor the time.
Well, I mean, arrogance is kind of built into Scientology, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you wonder, especially, you know, the people that were in Scientology, you would think, given what's going on in the world today and then how they are now, they learned nothing. They learned nothing. You look at, Scientology was not a perfect system, but some things they did get right, especially when it came to the projection. How this concept that's going on now these days about how a person that has done something, that they're the person that did it because they projected onto someone else.
Mm.
Well, in Scientology, we learned that as such a basic, but they call it the over doth speak loudly in accusation. In the world terms, they call it the person projecting, but it's the exact same principle. The asshole that's running around calling everybody else a criminal is the damn criminal, plain and simple. Look at him first.
Yeah.
The person who's telling you he didn't do shit is the first person you suspect. That's what we learned, and we investigate, and we find. I mean, we beat the fucking government, so our ways and technique couldn't be that bad. They may have been uncomfortable, but they were very effective because they were correct and right.
Well, we're certainly going into a pretty interesting time now with David Miscavige and Scientology litigation, and it's great to check in with somebody that has such a long history in it and understands how it's going. Jesse, thank you so much for putting some of this stuff in perspective for me today.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity, Tony, and as you know, you and I have been on this Ferris wheel for a while now, and I'm always willing to uh, help you and do what I can to bring understanding to this subject,
Well,
for
I
sure.
really appreciate it, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
All right, thank you, Tony.
Now I'm bunker down in bunker town again to witness history, ride the storm, wait to see a reckoning, and the day they all come. Oh, but I'm hunkered down in bunker town again.